Hello, class. Today's lesson is about. Oh, excuse me for a moment. Today's lesson is going to be about.
Daniel, what are you doing?
Uh-oh.
Good morning, everybody. I guess you've met my son, Daniel. Pretty fitting, actually, for that to happen today because we're going to get into King Lear, and King Lear has a lot to do with kids and the antics that they get up to. King Lear is often billed as the second greatest Shakespearean tragedy next to Hamlet, but in my opinion, Hamlet only edges out King Lear because of brand naming. It's got that famous line, "To be or not to be, that is the question." Now, Hamlet's a great play, but I believe that Lear and Hamlet are actually equal in terms of how good they are, both in terms of like how entertaining it is to watch, but also the depth that is there. So today's lesson is going to consist mostly of you just watching the play. Now, by grade 12, hopefully you're able to follow the language reasonably well. It still would make sense to do the road mapping, and so I'm going to toss up the Video Sparks notes and some other resources for you. So some of the themes that you can expect to see. The first one is hubris, leading people to become blind to obvious truths. So hubris is exceeding pride. It's like beyond pride. Pride to the point where it's dangerous or unreasonable. It's just obviously too much pride. And what you're going to see in this play is that this leads people to become blind, both literally and figuratively. So the play is going to open, I'll give you some background as we go. King Lear is a king of England, and he's got 3 daughters, and the play opens up with him thinking about dividing up his kingdom among his daughters. And he's got a favorite. Her name is Cordelia. So his plan going into to the big ceremony, and of course it's a huge ceremony that he's got, and actually he's about to decide. There's 2 men who want to marry Cordelia. He's about to decide which one's going to get her, and but things fall apart because Lear asks his daughters to tell him how much they love him. And depending on their answer, that decides what part of England they get. And so this moment, we can see Lear's hubris that's going on. Number one, he's going to be giving away his kingdom, but on the same token, he wants to still have all the privileges of being king. So what we hear is that he's going to ride around with like 100 knights following him and just like living at large. But all the duties involved with being a king are going to be passed along to his daughters to take care of. So, and then we've also got the hubris in the fact that here he is, he's going to sit down here in this big ceremony and like sit back, tell me how much you love me. And his first 2 daughters lay it on pretty thick, all right? When Cordelia goes to speak, she's going to tell him the truth. And it's going to... he's going to flip his lid, basically, and he disowns her, and he pawns her off to the King of France, and he never wants to see her again. He's absolutely blind to the fact that his other 2 daughters are obviously playing him for a fool. All right? So there's one example of hubris leading a person to become blind. There's a subplot. This is the reason why I love King Lear. There's a main plot, and then there's a subplot. The main plot involves Lear dividing up his kingdom, and then Cordelia has to leave to go to France because he kicks her out of the country, and his 2 daughters basically put up with him for like 10 minutes, and then they start cutting back on all of his allowances until finally they just kick him out, and he ends up living out in the wilderness for a little while. That's the main plot, and then there's a subplot that involves this guy named Gloucester, and he is the Duke of Gloucester, and so he's a high-ranking nobleman in England, and he's got a bastard son. He's got 2 sons, Edgar, who's his legitimate son, and Edmund, who's a bastard son. And the play starts off with Gloucester talking to Kent, who's another really important character. Kent is one of Lear's most trusted. He's an earl, he's a nobleman, and he's a trusted friend and advisor. And Lear, in his rage, is blind to the fact that Kent's trying to talk sense into him and kicks him out too. But anyways, Kent doesn't leave. He comes back in disguise to try to help Lear through this because he knows it's not going to go well. But anyways, it starts off with Gloucester introducing Edmund, and he introduces him in such just awful terms. He's right in front of Edmund talking about how this guy, he's an illegitimate son, but his mother's really good looking, and I really enjoyed making him and stuff, and just what a jerk, right? And that hubris, he's talking with impunity in front of another grown man, because Edmund is a grown man, thinking that, I'm Duke of Gloucester, I can say whatever I want. That is totally going to come back and ruin him. Gloucester and Lear follow a very similar trajectory in this story. So this is why we have a plot and a subplot. We see both of these stories happening, and they do intertwine as well, because Edmund is going to, his ambitions are going to lead him into some relations with Goneril and Regan, Lear's two other daughters who now split up the Kingdom of England. They're going to be intertwined, but at the same time we see a parallel going on here. It's through hubris that these two guys become blind to obvious truths, and that blindness is what causes their ruin. Something that's very cool, just to mention, there's a character, I mentioned Lear being foolish. There's a character in the play, keep your eye out for the Fool. He's like the court jester. And the cool thing about the Fool is that he's actually really astute. He sees exactly what's going on. And he can get away with saying things that normal characters wouldn't be able to get away with saying, because he's court jester and stuff. But it's neat. Keep an eye on him. He's kind of a cool character. Through him and his dialogue and what he says, this theme gets reinforced, because if hubris causes blindness, you can't get anybody with less hubris than the court jester, who's basically just, his job is being made fun of. And so he's got the opposite of hubris, and he's got the opposite of blindness happening. The second theme I'd like to introduce you to is the idea that being good and honest does not shield you from evil in this world. And one of the cool things about Shakespeare is the fact that the themes of his work tend to be timeless. They tend to be the types of ideas that last. And this is definitely one. There was a terrorist attack that I just heard about this weekend, happened last week, I believe, in France, another one, where a man drove a truck, it was early July, that's when it was, because it was Steel Day, drove a truck through a crowd to kill people. And you got to know that he killed people indiscriminately. There would have been probably some bad people in that crowd, bad people, but there would have been lots of good people, lots of innocent people, like children and stuff, and they were killed indiscriminately. So being good and honest, they don't necessarily shield you from evil in this world. And we see this definitely in King Lear. So the three most good characters in the play are, I mentioned Cordelia already, and I mentioned Kent already, and Lear kicks both them out of the country. And then there's this other character who I just mentioned, Edgar. He's the legitimate son of Gloucester, and all three of these characters end up in terrible straits because, well, factors beyond their control have ruined their lives, at least to an extent. One of those characters is going to be still alive at the end of this play. Two of them are going to be dead. I'm not going to say who they are. There's a motif throughout this play, theodicy. Theodicy is the idea, it's not the Odyssey, which is a great story for those of you who know it, Greek mythology hashtag, but theodicy is the idea that, why, God, do you allow bad things to happen to good people. And this comes up throughout the play, and there's something kind of neat. They use Roman gods and goddesses in this play as opposed to Christian terminology, I guess I would say. Instead of referring to God and to Jesus, they refer to, say, like Apollo and to Jupiter. And the reason why is because Shakespeare could have gotten into a lot of trouble by pushing this idea in his time, the idea that God would be unfair. But this is an idea that he's confronting in this story. It's, why does God, or why do the gods, sit back and allow evil people to rule while good people are trampled over? So this is a motif that we're going to see definitely throughout this play with appeals to the gods and goddesses. So for those of you who are paying attention in grade 10 when you did Greek and Roman mythology, that's going to pay off a little bit. The other thing that you're going to be doing today is you're going to be choosing your independent novels to read. And throughout this week, I'm going to be giving you time every day. I'm going to be setting a budget of time every day for reading. But make sure that you don't leave this to the last minute, because next week you're going to be writing a comparison essay. And you can't really write a comparison essay about books that you haven't read. So on the, if you take a look at Unit 0, which has got the course outline and the syllabus, have a look and see my list of independent books are there, along with links to free versions. All of them, except for Ties That Bind, Ties That Break, have got free versions online. Ties That Bind, Ties That Break is a newer book. It's from the 90s. And so it doesn't have the free online versions that the other books will have. Your overall idea that you're going to be looking for is suffering, which I alluded to in the very first video in this series. All of these books, just like Heart of Darkness and just like King Lear, they all have something to do with human suffering. And so what I want you to do is, as you are reading your two books, keep that in mind, and that would be the angle that I would take on my note-taking. You know that you're going to have to develop a thesis statement that has something to do with suffering. You're going to be making comparisons between these two books that have something to do with suffering. So anything that you come across as you read that has something to do with this overarching idea of human suffering, you would want to keep track of it. And keep track of it in terms of having not only the quotations, but also the page numbers. Here's a method that I'm going to share with you. It's a great method for writing essays. I mean, by now I'm sure you can write your own essay, but if you're going to learn one thing from me for essay writing, I would say it's this. If you have got a page with, say, like 30 quotations, 15 from each novel, right? You get 30 quotations that all have to do with suffering in some way. If you've got that and they all have page references, you've basically got your essay written. Because within that 30 quotations, I'm sure that you're going to find the 18 that you need, right? Those 3 sets of 3 from both novels. You're going to be able to find, your arguments are going to make themselves clear. Don't do things backwards with regards to essay writing. Don't come up with arguments and then try to force evidence into those arguments. You want to do it the other way. You want to find evidence and then see where the evidence leads you. Doing it that way will make the arguments, they'll materialize for you in general. And then you've got all the evidence you're going to need, and it's all referenced and cited already, so it's just a matter of following the patterns that you need to write state, quote, explain paragraphs and build an essay, which is going to be next week's task. So this week, by Friday, if you have both of your ISU novels, your independent novels, read, and you have got a total of, say, 30, we're going to leave that as a sort of a benchmark, 30 quotations, 15 at least from each novel, you're going to have everything that you need to write a great essay next week. All right, so today's lesson is going to be for you basically to watch King Lear, enjoy it. I've got a good version for you, but if the version I linked to doesn't work, any version, there's a lot of them on YouTube, they'll all do. Watch the play and get a sense of plot, characters, and setting.